person living with the diseases. We are told it's time, you're going to be switched to a biosimilar. What should we do? What is the next step as a person living with these diseases that we should take?
Start.
Well, I think I'll start with that because I think I'd be involved with that. I'd be prescribing, you'd be getting an infusion or a prescription. So I would be notified. And so the first thing is I would hope to have had the discussion with you in advance, because often when I write the prescriptions now, our electronic records will pop up what's covered, what's not covered. And so the discussion that biosimilars are appropriate, if I didn't think that you should have it because of some complex history problem, I would have that discussion with you, and that I would do an authorization request to deny that switch. So what can you do as a patient? I think one, go to the prescriber. They need to know. You can call and leave a message or use your portals, etc. Two, ask them very concretely. Don't say, what should I do? Say, is this okay for me? Ask a concrete question. Is it appropriate for me to switch? Do you have concerns? Maybe a phone conversation or something, or a visit or whatever. That's a place to start. The other thing is that insurance carriers and policymakers need to hear from people who are unhappy. So put it on your agenda to say, if you're unhappy with something, to write a letter of complaint or an email of complaint. So, because if you never complain, then you can't complain about the results. It's an important concept. So I think I would want to be contacted first. I do think that you should go to valid information sources, for agencies, organizations that validate their information rather than just somebody's sales site or somebody who's got an axe to grind, because there's so much wasted time and energy on the internet or whatever, and you shouldn't waste your time there. Life's too short.
I would just say that, as I listen to this conversation, I had kind of a unique perspective when I was at HHS, because I worked in the secretary's office, but I was there when we were creating Part D. And so I was involved in both the development of the Part D, and then the kind of all of the media component of Part D, and then literally taking phone calls from Medicare beneficiaries on Part D and questions they might have. And I think it really, I was also there when there was the vaccine shortage. And so we actually did a campaign that traveled around with the Surgeon General and answered people's questions. And the biggest challenge really is that each individual person has a question that is probably representative of some other person, and every question is valid. But how do you get information to them in a way that they, sometimes it's just a lack of trust, as Dr. McKibben says about, well, where do you go? So, really biosimilars has been fairly heated as this has all evolved over the period of time. And we at ASBM, I'm a former regulator policy person, said, I want everything to be that you can answer any question. We can point to a resource. We have been very data driven. We've been based upon surveys from physicians and really talking with the patient community. And so, what I would say is, what is the first thing you do? I think of the first thing that I literally met many, many Medicare beneficiaries. And it was a really unique experience to understand that the individual, when we were developing that policy, we would say, well, this is really complicated. You don't know what each individual patient wants. You don't know what is important to each individual patient. When we were developing Part D, it might be, I care what pharmacy is closest. I care, it's not always as simple. It doesn't always come down to money. It doesn't always come down to, one particular thing. And so recognizing, I would say multiple resources is important. Packaging resources is important, but ultimately we all have an obligation. And certainly, when we at ASBM want to get information out there and we make ourselves accessible. And I think that's really, I think patient community, is a really good place to start, because they're coming at it from the perspective of understanding the needs of the patient. So you are a patient. Andy is someone who really understands the patient perspective, not only from his own experiences personally, but also from his life experiences. And I think, I have a brother who died of thyroid cancer. We've all had someone who's been affected. And I think it's just, really taking that to heart, that our job is to assuage people without fooling people. And, I think that's the role And ultimately, you, Tiffany, are probably, and Andy are best situated. And my experience as a regulator and Dr. McKibbins as a physician, we all have different shoes that we have stood in, but we need to understand that we all kind of ultimately should be working for the patient, because that's ultimately what this is all about. No matter where you are standing, this is about access and about treatment and about, providing a level of comfort and trust, because if they don't trust you, then basically it affects every aspect of their life.